And this is Coach Alicia coming at you today with kind of a sort of interactive live talk that we are going to do about perfecting your form. And this is sort of like the secret to getting faster gains, injury prevention, how to do movements in the right and safe way. And I'm gonna first start off with sort of talking about the reasons why we need to focus in on our form. And then I'm going to sort of show you some common mistakes and errors that people make when they are doing certain movements. And we'll sort of talk about how to fix those, things to look out for, things to feel, all of that good stuff as we go. So I'm going to, like I said, start first about 5, 10 minutes or so, sort of talking through things, and then we'll go into my lovely garage gym here and do some movements for you. So first, I hope you have enjoyed all of the wonderful information that you have gotten this week. Super glad you're here. Today we're going to be, like I said, diving into something that this really does get overlooked way too often, and it's form. So you'll probably see a lot of people, if you work out in a gym, you probably see tons of different variations of form. And if you work out at home, you may be questioning sort of like, am I doing the right movement? Am I feeling this correctly? Or like, these squats are really hurting my knee, or these deadlifts are just like hurting my back. And I don't really know like what it is that I'm doing. So today, that's what we're going to sort of talk about: how to get stronger, make faster progress, and how to stay injury free. So let's sort of start off by talking about what good form really means and how to dial it in. A lot of times when people talk about fitness or lifting weights or anything like that being dangerous, they're typically talking about because they think people get injured. Most of the injuries that I ever see happen in a gym is because of people doing incorrect form or poor form. And I have been strength training since I was 15 years old. I have seen it all. Trust me, seen it all. The people that get injured are the ones who are either going way too heavy, are compensating their form to get more reps, or who just like need a little extra nudge on how to actually do a movement properly. Also, what happens too is a lot of time people will plateau, not because they're not working hard and doing a lot of stuff, but because they're either doing too much, doing it too fast, or doing it with the wrong technique. So really today, what I want you to get out of this talk is that the quality of the rep and the movement that you're doing is always going to be way better than the quantity that you're doing. I would rather see you do 5 beautiful body weight squats with proper form and technique than to do 50 of them with incorrect form and technique. So we're first going to talk about is like kind of, why does form matter? Like, we're just lifting weights, we're just squatting down, we're just bending at our hips. Well, one, kind of what we've already just have spoken about is injury prevention. Poor form is going to equal more joint stress, muscle imbalance, and long-term damage. Also, too, if we're not using proper form with certain exercises, we may be kind of unintentionally doing a totally different exercise. For example, say we're doing bicep curls and you see people in the gym, they're doing way too heavy weight and they're kind of like doing this like swinging motion to get the dumbbells up. We've now taken out the bicep. We've kind of put all the work into the anterior deltoid and kind of your chest a little bit, and actually a little bit of the hips, because you're kind of using that momentum to get the dumbbell up. And then suddenly, like, why do the front of my shoulders hurt? Why are my elbows hurting? Why are my biceps not growing? Well, it's because we're not actually activating the muscle that we think that we're activating. So that leads me to my second point here is muscle activation. Good form helps target the right muscle groups without compensating. Again, I just use like the bicep example here. Or you could see people like, say they're doing like bench press and you see the people that kind of like they get stuck in a certain spot and they're like, twisting their hip or like putting all the weight into their shoulders to try and drive the bar or the dumbbells up. Well, guess what we just stopped using? Our chest. Guess what the bench press is supposed to work? Our chest and our anterior deltoids. So not having proper form with some of those movements means that we're not even actually getting the correct activation that we're looking for with certain movements. So that also leads to the next point. When we use proper form and full range of motion and really work on that technique, is you're going to have better gains. Pure and simple. Full range of motion plus proper tempo is always going to equal more effective reps. So we go back to that bicep curl example, and you're swinging the dumbbells up and you're trying to do 50-pound dumbbells to get some easy bicep curls in, and you're like, why are my biceps not growing? Again, you're not actually using your biceps because we're just purely focusing on momentum to get them up. The last sort of top or bullet point on why form matters that I'll talk about is that we want to be strong for the long term. The big goal of all of our programs at VShred is to set you up for longevity. We do not want this just to be sort of like a 30, 60, or 90-day quick fix and be able to make all these changes and stuff, but then not be able to sustain it later on. When we slow everything down and we focus on proper form, proper technique, and doing all of the things in the right fashion that they should be, then we're going to have that longevity for the long term. When you see some of those like old dudes and old gals at the gym that have just been strength training forever, typically their form is really good. And the reason why they are still there at 75, 80, 85, 90, still lifting weights is because they took the time to learn proper form, which caused less injury, caused less fatigue, caused less joint damage, and equaled better gains. So those are just a couple little bullet points on why form really is going to matter. So if you're kind of like being honest with yourself, what's one move that you've always wondered if you're doing right? Drop it in the comments below here. One of the coaches will reach out to you, myself or one of the other VShred coaches, and we'll kind of talk you through sort of how to tackle some common mistakes when after this live is finished here. Chances are there's probably one or two movements that you kind of always like in the back of your mind, you're like, I'm not really sure if I'm doing this correctly or not. So drop it down below in the comments so one of us can help you. I'm going to go over probably the 6, what I think are most common form and technique things that or movements that people tend to suffer on next. So if one of them is one of the movements that you're thinking about is this, then you're good to go. But I'm going to talk about squats, deadlifts, push-ups, planks, shoulder presses, and bent over rows. I think that those are 6 of the most kind of common form mistakes that I see people doing that have very, very, very simple fixes to them. I'm going to show you how you can use some props in a couple different ways to make sure that you are doing, deadlifting correctly. And just a couple kind of places you should feel it, kind of things to look out for, things to think about while you're doing it. Because at the end of the day, if we are able to do these exercises and these movements correctly, then it's kind of less work that you have to do. Again, quality of the reps over the quantity. Wouldn't you want to do 5 really awesome, perfect squats and you finish and you're like, oh my God, I feel my quads, I feel my glutes, I feel my hamstrings, I feel everything working on that, instead of doing 50 sort of like super fast ones where you're not really getting any type of activation on, and then like your knees hurt, your hips hurt, and your muscles just burn, but you're not really building any strength in them. So we are going to first start off with squats. And now, if you have vertigo or you get really dizzy, I'm sorry, but I'm going to move my tripod so that we can sort of kind of get together here and be able to chat more. All right. So any exercise program that you do is always going to have squats on it. It is a very functional movement. Squats are going to work your quads, your hamstrings, and your glutes. Okay. It's a great lower body exercise. It's also going to work your core quite a bit because you have to work on keeping your torso upright. Um, and it really does help build strength and longevity for things like getting off the toilet when you get older, getting off the couch, being able to walk up the stairs, um, being able to kind of, get out of your car, stuff like that. Yes, it's a great exercise to get like super jack legs and like a nice good old booty, but also wouldn't you want to be able to get out of your car a lot easier as well too? So Squats are going to help you do that. Now, one of the most common things that I see with squats to begin with is people not really knowing how to set themselves up. When we're doing a squat, I have my bench here behind me. I'm going to show you how to use that. But it's literally just like you're sitting down into a chair and coming back up. If you were to go to sit down in a chair and you were trying to like, put your knees forward or like go on your toes, like you just wouldn't be able to do it. So the first thing I like to teach people is just find a bench or a chair and just sit down in it. The first thing that you did when you did this is you initiated your hips backwards. You put the weight distribution fully through your foot instead of on your toes or on your heels. And then you press your hips back. Now, guess what we're going to do when we do just a body weight squat to begin with? We're going to have our feet slightly outside of our hips, chest up, shoulder blades down and back. And our weight distribution is fully through our foot. So I like to kind of think of your foot as an upside down triangle. So the weight distribution should go across the top of your foot from big toe to small toe, and then meet down into the center, kind of right above your heel. And all we're going to do to first start off with is initiate those hips backwards, keep that chest up, and we're going to squat all the way down and come back up. If I was to do that same motion back to my chair, it's the same exact thing. I can just take a step in front and it's the same exact thing. Now, my squat's going to look a little bit different compared to Victoria, who is watching, or Mike, who is watching, or any of the other coaches that you had this week, because limb length and kind of our body shapes will make a difference. If you are somebody who has really, really long legs, your squat's going to tend to be bent over a little bit more just because we need to make room for your femurs. If you're somebody who has like kind of like an average size torso or a little bit smaller torso, kind of like I do, you're going to be able to kind of keep yourself more upright as you go. Also, too, I compete in Olympic lifting, so my squat looks a little bit different because of my sport, based on just kind of it's somebody who maybe just does like, runs marathons or something like that. Another common mistake that I see as well is when people do squats and they first start off and they get that kind of knee caving coming in. This signals to me that those glutes are not turned on. Now, when we're coming up out of a squat, if you have a little bit of knee caving as you come up, that's kind of okay. When you're coming out of it, first thing that activates is those inner thighs and those glutes, which is responsible for that internal rotation of your leg. So a little bit of knees coming in as you stand up is okay. We want to avoid, though, those knees caving in as we go down. Ow, that like hurts. I don't even like to demonstrate that because it doesn't feel good. To fix this, we make sure that feet are underneath, slightly turned out. We push those knees to the outside as you go. Now, I will tell you, if you are somebody who grew up kind of in the 80s and 90s and you had all these people saying like, don't put your knees over your toes when you squat, ignore that. It's totally fine to have your knees go over your toes when you squat. If anything, that means you have really great ankle mobility. So as you come down, again, if you watch any type of power lifters or Olympic lifters, CrossFitters, people that do kind of like squats for a job, I guess we'll say, their knees are always going out past their toes. It's totally fine. The next exercise we're going to talk about, and my laptop just went to sleep, so I got to turn it back on for my notes, is deadlifts. This is probably the one that people, I don't want to say mess up the most, but have the most room for improvement in. The deadlift is going to work your hamstrings, so back, your butt, your glutes, low back. It also really does work your upper back, core, kind of everything all together. But it's primarily a hinging exercise because at our hips, we are hinging at our hips here. Now, when we deadlift, I'm going to show you some common mistakes that I see. First, I got a handy dandy broom here. So if you got a broom at home, this is a great thing to use. I do have a bunch of barbells here to use, but it's just gonna be easier to use a broom. So if you're doing deadlifts with like a barbell or even dumbbells, I'll demonstrate with dumbbells as well too. Using a broom is a really great way to start with this. When we deadlift, a lot of times I see people and they kind of do this like rounded back thing like that. You probably have seen this and people are like, oh my God, my back hurts so much when I deadlift. What am I doing? And it's just because we didn't put the exercise in the right spot where it's supposed to be. Now, I want you to imagine that you're carrying a whole, like you grabbed all the groceries out of the car because you're super jacked from doing, toned in 90 in our V-Shred programs. and you have to close the door. So what do you do when you close the door? You got all these groceries in your hand and you pop that butt back to kind of close the door. That's a hip hinge. And that's essentially what we're doing when we are deadlifting. So again, demonstrating it's really easy to do with a broom. You just take the end of it off. I just want to close the door with my butt and then stand back up. My feet, again, are in sort of the same position as when we were squatting. So right underneath my hips, can be slightly turned out a little bit. Weight distribution is in that upside down triangle. And if you have the bar or your broom handle with you, a good way to know if you're hinging correctly is that the broom handle will not leave your thighs. So if you watch, as I hinge backwards, the bar is still on my legs and I stand back up. This is our hip hinge deadlift here. If I was to try and take that out of the hinge and I do the way that some people deadlift that you see in the gym, and they're just kind of bending down like this, look how far away this is away from me. Okay, I've turned this into a squat and I've turned it into kind of a low back exercise. Keep that broom handle right against your thighs, chest up, shoulder blades down and back, push the car door close. You can even just start by practicing coming to your knees and then keep that broom handle on your thighs. Okay, so we come all the way down. You can start just with here. This is kind of also called like an RDL. And then once we kind of get comfortable with that, just slowly work your way, stop at the knees, and then come down to the shins, stop at the knees, and come up. Once you have figured out that perfect movement pattern, then you can sort of get it so it's all one movement together. You'll notice that the bar is staying really close to my legs the entire time. It's almost brushing up against there. So I know that I got that car door butt slam and I'm keeping it all in the back of my legs. You know you will be doing this correctly if you feel it in your hamstrings and in your butt. Now, if you're doing this with dumbbells, it's still the same exact thing. You can just work on keeping sort of like your knuckles dragged against your the outside of your thighs here. So still I'm hinging down, squeezing and coming up. As I come up, I'm activating my glutes. So squeeze your glutes, keep that back nice and tight. Keep those knuckles on your legs the entire time. Another super handy trick, and I used to use this with my like teenage athletes when they're first learning how to deadlift, is to keep your broom handle on your back. So you want to have 3 points of contact: the back of your head, the middle of your back, and then your low back. If you hinge correctly, those points of contact will stay the entire time. If you hinge incorrectly and you let go of that tension, and I start rounding, look what's happened to here. Now I only have 1 point of contact. I'm missing my head and my low back because my back is rounded. Start here, kind of hinge and come forward. Hinge, come forward. Once you feel comfortable with that, you can take that off, and there's your deadlifts for you. The next move that we'll talk about is the ever-loving push-up. Now, again, going for a ride here, bringing this down low. When we're doing push-ups, number one, there is nothing wrong with doing push-ups onto your knees. If you are able to get more range of motion on your knees, that means we're going to get more muscle activation. There is a big difference in being able to do push-ups where we're kind of just like right like this, or if we drop to our knees and we're able to get fully down and all the way up. When you're doing push-ups, there's 3 things I want you to think about. First off is keeping your hands kind of slightly wider than your shoulders and slightly turned out. I also want you to think about not letting your upper back go loose. And what I mean by that is you see a lot of people doing push-ups and they kind of have like this thing going with their upper back. That doesn't feel very good. We want to keep that sucker nice and tight. All of the movement should come purely from your elbows and kind of your shoulders, nothing in your upper back at all. So again, this is something that you can try. You can start just by on your knees or up against a bench or up against the wall, keeping everything nice and tight. Okay. I come down as one unit. My elbows are going slightly kind of back at an angle. We don't want our elbows to be coming out here. We want them sort of back. So back sort of like almost at 45 degrees, but like a little bit less or so. We're here, elbows come back, press and come all the way up. Nothing in my upper back moves at all when I do that. It is all from my elbows and my shoulders. So if you're feeling a lot of tension in your back, start by going up against the wall or go up against a bench or up against like a counter. Like I have my barbell set right here, so I can do the same thing like here on my barbell. Start with a modified version first and then go into a more harder version. 100% of the time, you will have more benefit from doing the easier version first, build the strength up, get that full range of motion, and then progress into another one. Going for a ride again here. So we covered squats, we covered deadlifts, we covered push-ups. Next up, we're going to cover planks. Dang, I should have just left my thing down low. Planks are something that is, it's a full body movement. And a lot of times people are like, oh, like it's just a plank, like everybody could do that. But can you do a plank efficiently? So what I mean by this is oftentimes you see people doing planks. And again, I should have worn a tank top today. This would have been easier. I'm sorry. But you see people doing planks and they kind of like are letting their upper back sag. So you see how my shoulders kind of sag right here. I'm sort of like letting my hips drop or whatever. And what I've done is I've now put all of the pressure into my shoulders here and really straining on that rotator cuff. So a few things to think about when we are doing planks to make them the most efficiently. First off, pull that core in nice and tight. You know that feeling like right before you sneeze where you're like, and everything kind of tightens up? That's a great feeling to try and replicate. When you're doing planks, kind of same position that you're doing in your push-ups. You want your hands slightly wider than your shoulders, and you want to maintain sort of that pushing through the ground motion. So if I'm here, I don't want to have my shoulders here. I want to be pressing through the ground. Also, I want you sort of to think that you're trying to drive your knees and your quads up into your core. That's going to kind of make this whole full body activation for you. So I'm here, I get my hands in the right spot. I make sure that my shoulder blades are not doing this wonky thing. I'm pressing through the ground here. And from here, what I do is I try to drive my knees up while bringing the heel of my hand towards my knees. In an instant, once you activate that, you're going to start shaking and you're going to really feel how that whole entire body responds to a plank. So just like push-ups, start up against the wall, start up against the counter, start up against a bench, start on your knees if you need to. The same premise applies when we're doing an elbow plank as well too. We don't want to have those shoulder blades kind of do this like wonky thing like that. Push through the ground to keep that whole back nice and level. You should be able to think that you have like a bowl of water or something on your back and it's able to balance there. So up next, we are going to do, well, let me check my notes real quick. Shoulder presses. This is a great one. Now, most of the time, I will tell you that people, when they tell me that they have issues with shoulder presses and they're saying, well, I'm not strong enough, I can't do it, it's 100% a form thing. So the shoulder press is you can do a barbell, you can use dumbbells, you can actually use a band too if you want to, but we're going to use our trusty broom handle again. When we're doing a shoulder press, we're coming from our collarbone to straight above our head. Now, the thing to think about with this is first to create a straight line as best as we can. We don't want, the common mistake I see with shoulder presses is people going like this. Look how far away this bar is from me. Do you think that I have any strength when this is like way out here? Think about if you're trying to hold a weight plate. You have more strength holding it above your head. You could hold it there for a long time over trying to like hold it out here in front of you. So the first thing to do is just to have that bar go straight up, all the way up, okay? So collarbone straight above your head. my legs and knees are slightly bent, okay? We don't really want to do very many exercises on locked legs. It's not very good. Slightly bent. I got that chew feeling in my core, and I'm driving the bar straight up, 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 up my face, pressing, and then come all the way back down. So you want to imagine like if I had a piece of or like a marker here and I was going against the wall, that that would be almost a straight line down and up. So we're not trying to come out here. You're going to light up that low back. You're going to end up putting everything into your anterior shoulder and kind of like your pec major a little bit. And we've completely shut off our lats, our middle delt, and our posterior delt here. Now, you can do the same thing again with dumbbells. So if we're doing shoulder presses with our dumbbells, we don't want to come out here, biceps next to your ears, and then all the way back down. Now, I know what you're probably saying. You're like, well, what happens if I don't have the shoulder mobility to do that? Great question. We just do as best as you can, and we work on our shoulder mobility, which will be a whole different video, to make sure that we can get up to there. The same premise applies if you are doing them seated. If we're doing them seated, let me move my broom handle here. If we're doing them seated, we don't want to get that like this motion here. Sit up nice and tall, okay? Tuck that pelvis under, arms straight up, back down. Straight up, back down. The last exercise that we'll cover, because I know I'm throwing a lot at you, is the bent over row. So very similar to the deadlift, this is a really common one that people just sort of, they round their back, they have like locked out legs, they're rounding their back, and they're kind of like using momentum to sort of bring up the weight. And we don't want to use that. I'm going to first show you how to set up with my broom handle, and then we'll go through with dumbbells as well. So we're going to pretend that this is like a barbell bent over row, because if you can master the barbell bent over row, then it will translate better into sort of any other type of rowing that you do. So remember when we did our deadlifts and we did that kick the door closed with your butt. We want to mimic that same thing. So slide in our knees, kick that bar close or kick the door closed. From here, we're driving that bar up almost right above your belly button, so about 2 or 3 inches above your belly button. And you'll notice that my elbows are going back because we're trying to light up this lat part right here and then all the way back down. So coming straight back, all the way back down. Yes, there's lots of variations that you can do. You can do like supinated bent over rows like this. You can do, wide grip bent over rows to get into the rear delts a little bit more. The premise is all the same. We need to lock that lower body in place, kick the car door closed, and then pull from here. Again, I'm isolating everything that is not just my upper back for that. Same premise applies when you are doing the dumbbells too. Knuckles on the thighs, close the car door, pull up. Make sure, especially when you're doing dumbbells, we don't let those shoulders creep up. We don't want to do this like turtle action here. We want to keep them straight behind us. Okay, same thing applies if we're going to go neutral rows here, if we're doing supinated rows here, if we're doing, I don't know, alternating like this, my shoulder blades are staying down, my elbows are coming back. I'm sort of bringing that dumbbell to my hips and back at an angle there. If you can master that, it translates over to every other type of row. So if you're doing like a bent over row, same exact motion, okay? Close that car door, pulling straight back, straight up. When you're doing seated rows, if you're doing a standing row, the same exact kind of idea applies there. So those were sort of what I would say are the most common mistakes for workouts or exercises that I see. Again, if there's one that you have a question about that we did not cover, please drop it below in the comments and one of us can kind of give you some easy feedback for that. So I'm going to close just with a couple tips on how to improve your form to really help prevent injury. Number one, lighten the weight. This is the most important. If you're looking for longevity to keep lifting forever and ever, it's not going to matter that you took 2 weeks to do lighter weight to make sure your form was better. Just lighten the load until you master the movement. People forget that strength training and doing any type of weight exercises is a skill, very much the same as running, as any other sport that you play. There is skill involved with strength training. Master the form and technique first. Use mirrors or videos for feedback. I know a lot of people are like about having tripods in the gym and stuff like that, but there is a lot of benefit for it if it's helping you kind of see how your body is moving and different corrections to make. Make sure you warm up properly to increase mobility. So tight hips and tight shoulders affect everything. If those hips are tight, good luck trying to squat and with pure proper form. If those shoulders are really tight or that upper back is really tight, you're going to really struggle on opening everything up for those push-ups or those overhead presses. Focus on mind-muscle connection. Don't just go through the motion. When you're doing a bicep curl, kind of think about squeezing that bicep and then lowering it down. Don't just like go through the motions. Think about what you're doing. That is the secret sauce of all of like the super jack bodybuilders that you see. They have really, really good mind-muscle connection, so they're able to feel the movement through the whole entire range of motion. Also practice tempo control. We don't need to do any of these like super fast movements here. You can do a super easy 2 seconds down, pause at the top, 2 seconds back down. You can do that with every movement. Deadlifts, 2 seconds down, pause, feel that stretch, squeeze, 2 seconds up, back to the top. Watch your gains just light up when you use proper tempo. And then don't compare your range of motion or depth to other people. Just like with this, like I mentioned with the squat, it applies to the deadlift as well too. If you're somebody and you've got really long legs, short torso, really long legs, long femurs, your squat is going to look very different than somebody who is, shorter and has maybe a longer torso with shorter femurs. It all depends on how your body kind of works and moves. So last little bit is that, I mentioned real quick, and I know I'm kind of over time, but I get really excited about this type of stuff. But quality over quantity. 6 perfect reps is always going to be more beneficial than 12 sloppy ones. You're going to have less soreness and more progress by doing things properly with proper form and technique. You will feel stronger, faster with controlled reps and good technique than you will with out of control and sloppy techniques. And I don't mean faster in terms of speed wise, but you do those 10 bicep curls like nice and slow with like really good form. That next morning, you're going to wake up and you're going to feel that exercise a lot more than if you just did 10 bicep curls super quick with improper form. You could always add weight, but you can't undo an injury. And what I mean by that is you can always start light and build up once that form and technique gets better, but you can't undo an injury from doing improper technique. That injury is going to be there and you're going to have to work through it. And the unfortunate part that we do have to talk about is ego lifting. And what I mean by this is you see the people in the gym, like I said with the bicep curls, they're swinging those 50s up, or they're trying to deadlift, 3 plates off the ground, and their back is like more curved than, the golden arches at McDonald's. Ego lifting doesn't get anybody anywhere. And again, I tell you this as somebody who has been I'm going to be 39 years old this year. I started strength training when I was 15. Ego lifting gets you nowhere. The people who practice slow, proper technique and form always will do a million times better than anybody who's doing ego lifting. So, quick recap. Proper form equals better results. Better results means fewer injuries. Fewer injuries means more longevity. Just take the time to practice your movements. Think of strength training as a skill that we need to practice, and you'll be able to see so many results and gains come. So thank you for attending this. I hope that you can save this, watch it again whenever you need to. Again, if there's a movement you've got questions about, drop it in the comments below, and one of the coaches will work through that. Have a great rest of your week.